Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs, where you'll find real stories, practical strategies, and the mindset shifts you need for entrepreneurship. If you've ever felt like midlife was too late to launch a business, write a book, or chase a dream, think again. I'm Lynette Turner, your host, and I'm bringing you inspiring conversations and practical tips to help nudge you forward and keep growing in midlife. So let's jump in.
Well, hey, Jennifer Williams, how are you?
Well, good morning, Lynette. I'm doing great. Thanks for having us.
I am super excited to have you on the podcast today, Midlife Women Entrepreneurs. You and I actually met through the podcast, which I'm like so thankful for, because when I heard your story, it's a great story and I can't wait for you to share it. So before we get into it, why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on who you are and what you've been up to?
Okay, great. Well, my name is Jennifer Williams, and I own a small business in St. Louis, Missouri called St. Louis Closet Company. What we do is we design, manufacture, and install custom closets and organizational systems for residential clients and commercial clients. I have been doing this for 34 years. So super exciting. I started the business when I was 25 years old, and I had just graduated from St. Louis University. And like a lot of college students, I had no idea what to do. So I was like, oh, I'll go back to school. So I enrolled in graduate school, and I was getting a degree in marketing, but I was also living on my own, and I had student loans to pay. So I was waiting tables at 3 different restaurants, going to graduate school and still trying to figure things out. A friend of mine came to St. Louis, and he had been out in California working with a custom closet company out there. And he was setting up franchises in St. Louis. So we went out and he's like, Jennifer, I think you would love this. You're super organized. And so he hired me, and I started designing custom closets. And within 2 weeks, I fell in love with it. I mean, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, so it wasn't that far of a stretch to think of starting a business. So I immediately quit working at that company. I dropped out of business school, and I quit 2 of my 3 waitressing jobs because I had to keep one, just in case I needed some money. And I decided I was going to start St. Louis Closet Company. So I didn't really know what to do. So I reached out to the Small Business Administration, and they had a class you could go to and learn how to write a business plan and how to apply for a small business loan. So I went through all those steps, which were incredibly helpful for me. As first of all, I didn't have a business background. I was a marketing major, and it just helped me put together a business plan, a marketing plan, to sort of figure out where I wanted to go. So I applied for the loan. Now, I was young. I was 25 years old.
Yeah.
I had no collateral. I did not have any co-signers. And like many small businesses, I thought I needed $25,000. I really probably needed 2 or 3 times that. But I went into the bank, and my voice sounds very young on the phone. So everybody was like, oh, is your mom and dad involved? And I was like, no, it's just me. So I finally got through to a bank at the time in St. Louis. I'll never forget. His name was Al Jonigan. It was Boatman's Bank at the time. And he's like, yeah, why don't you come down and tell me your story? So I packed up back at the time, at the time, and this was before internet, before everything, and so I had all these files in milk crates, and I was driving a Volkswagen Bug, and I drove my little Bug down to the bank, and I carried in my crates of research and information. And he was like, wow, Jennifer, he says, let's look at this and we'll get back to you. And I was like, well, this was the Monday of Thanksgiving week in 1991. And I said, you know what? Thursday's Thanksgiving. I'd really love to have something to be thankful for. Yeah. And he called me at home on Wednesday and said, you've been approved for the small business loan. And so I went out that weekend and I bought tools. I bought an installation van. I bought an electric typewriter because, once again, that's, how we ran the office then. I did have a cell phone in my car, but it was a big bag phone, right?
This one you're talking about.
And so that's how I got started. And I was, we're not a franchise. I started it from scratch. And like I said, we're in St. Louis. And St. Louis, like many cities, is so supportive of locally owned small businesses.
Right.
And I just feel like my community and my clients and my employees have allowed us to continue to grow through the years. Now, there's been plenty of ups and downs.
Yeah.
9/11, the Great Recession, 2008, and then we had the pandemic. And, I have a business where we have to come to work, right? We have to go into clients' homes. So figuring that whole piece out was not easy. I'm the mother of 2 kids. My son, Matthew, is 24, and my daughter, Hallie, is 23. And they're both graduates of Vanderbilt University. And my son just recently started working for us at St. Louis Closet Company. Okay. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
And my daughter just started her full-time job in Dallas. So that's sort of the quick backstory.
Your backstory. Okay. Well, let's dig in a little bit. Yeah. Let's dig into it. So, okay. So first of all, I loved what you said about when you went to the bank and they said, well, are your mom and dad involved? What was your gut saying? Like, oh my God, I'm not going to get this thing. How did you push through that?
It's funny. I spend a lot of my time talking to high school and college students about entrepreneurship. And there's a lot of stages. There's never a bad stage to become an entrepreneur, right? But when you're young, I think you have less to lose, right? Maybe you don't have as much to, give. I didn't have collateral. I didn't have a house, but I also, because of those things, I wasn't as afraid to take risks when they were, the banks were questioning me. And there's also, this industry is a very male dominated industry, less so today than it was 34 years ago, but it's kind of the construction industry. So, I just sort of, I don't even know if I thought about it, right? I was just sort of determined I was going to do this. And I was like, well, no, my parents are not co-signing and I'm going to make this happen one way or the other. And I'd love you to be part of it. So and it's sort of, today we get sort of the same thing. We work with a lot of contractors and builders, and sometimes being a woman, earning their respect, you just have to sort of, I don't know, stand up for yourself and be like, look, no, this is me and I got this. And maybe you have to work a little harder to prove yourself. But once you've proved yourself, those are the people that are behind you all the way. And that initial banker, he's retired. He's no longer a banker, but he is still today stays in touch with me.
Oh, that's great.
And, is one of our biggest fans.
Okay, that's awesome. So listen, I know exactly what you do in terms of helping people in terms of their lives. Now, a lot of people would think, oh, well, she's a closet person. How does that help people's lives? But firsthand, I know because I remember when I was in Calgary at the time and I was in this townhouse and, a new build and the little tiny closet, master bedroom closet wasn't even big enough for me, let alone if I had a partner at the time. And I just remember being so frustrated. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't it was dark. I couldn't organize my clothes. I felt like I had a wardrobe problem. But honestly, it was an organizational problem. And I'll never forget when I treated myself to a closet company coming in, designing my closet, looking at all of my things and finding spots for them. And of course, I did a bit of purging. But when you and I were on our pre-call, I think that's we were talking about how keeping organized in your life starts, I think, from the moment you wake up in the morning, you think, what am I going to wear?
Absolutely. I was, as I said in my story, I was always a very organized kid, right? I loved to color code my clothes. I loved to, fold my sweaters. I was sort of always there. But organization, I think, is sort of the basis of everything. It's a stress reliever. It reduces anxiety. It allows you to find your things faster, easier. When you open your closet door in the morning, if everything is a big jumbled mess, it's hard to sort of start your day, right? I mean, it's like the clarity of opening up your closet door and having everything in its place it's just like, okay, this is going to be a good day. This is how we're going to start our day. And organization is proven to reduce stress. Rubbermaid did a study a few years ago that said, if you have an organized closet, it will save you 10 minutes a day, every day, looking for things. And that's savings of, an hour a week. And then imagine if you multiply that to the other people that live in your home. Like my kids obviously grew up with great custom closets, but they now have developed habits along the way where they're organized people, right? And if you give people a place to put stuff, it goes back there, right? So let's say you have, adjustable shoe shelves, right? Well, you take your shoes off the shelf, you wear them that day and you come home at night and my shoes go back on that shelf. There's no longer the big open floor, right? Where you just throw all your shoes in. And, kids love to have a place for everything, right? They love you can organize their playroom and put their toys in baskets, and you can teach them these habits. And if you think about schools, all schools have lockers, right? Whether their kids are in preschool, high school, college, people have lockers, right? And the kids know when they get there, they put their coat in their locker, they put their book bag in their locker. Well, if they have a locker at home, guess what? The same thing happens at home. And then that way your mornings aren't as hectic running around looking for the shoes and the coats and the homework and the sporting equipment. So being organized in your life is, I just think it's everything. It's the foundation for success, right? Because if you're not organized, how do you get through your day? And it all sort of filters through everything you do. So if your home is organized, then maybe your car is going to be organized. And then you get to work and your desk is going to be organized. And then maybe your email system that you've set up is organized. And maybe the photos on your phone are organized. And everything in life is runs smoother, runs quicker, is less stress-free. We've all had that moment where you can't find your keys or you can't find that one thing you're looking for. But if you have an organizational system that you've worked on, it just helps. And like you said, with your own closet, after, you just thought, this is just this awful closet, right? I just can't deal with it. But when you took everything out and the company came and put in an organized closet system, all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, I can see my clothes. I can get dressed easier. And then the other thing about having an organized closet is it helps keep your clothing, your shoes, your purses, it keeps them in better shape, right? It helps take care of them so they're not getting ripped or torn or lost or scuffed up or wrinkled in your own closet. So we spend so much money on clothing and shoes and I have clients that spend
Bags and stuff. Yeah.
so much money on purses and shoes. And then I walk in and they just have them thrown all over the floor. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like, let's build you some shoe shelves. First of all, they're going to look really pretty on these nice organized shelves. But secondly, you're going to take care. This is an investment. Your wardrobe is an investment. So take care of those things.
Have you ever, Jennifer, gone back to a client, like, using this as a bit of a use case, have you ever gone back to a client and said, like, oh, like, I guess maybe even just the initial one, like, have you ever had like that crazy, like, my Lord, we got work to do? Actually, probably throughout the whole house, but, starting here, and then maybe done some work with that client and then gone back later to just kind of see how they're utilizing it. And if there was sort of a bit of a mental shift there.
Absolutely. Well, pretty much every day, 70% of my business is repeat business.
Okay.
Because most of the time when people get one closet done, they see the immediate change, right? It's unlike a lot of home improvements. Like when you have to get a new roof or a new hot water heater, you're like, oh, well, we have to do it, but it's not that exciting, right? You just write a check and you're like, oh, we needed that. But when you get a custom closet, every day you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing. Oh, I can't believe how much it holds. I can't believe how organized they say. And then you want more, right? You're like, wow, my closet is so great. Now I'm going to do my pantry. Or, first, the number one thing we do is closets. The second thing we do is pantries. And the third thing we do is laundry rooms, in that order. But you just you start craving this organization. And a lot of times you'll walk into a home and you'll be like, okay, wait a minute. Before you get a custom closet, you need to declutter, right? Because we all have too much stuff. We all do. And you have to really take a look at, the life you're living. Are you purchasing too much? Are you hanging on to too much stuff that maybe you shouldn't? So you really have to get into the mindset.
So do you actually walk them through those questions? Like, do you sort of what is the experience? Like, I'm really trying to get because your message clearly is organized closet is becomes an organized life, becomes an organized mind that becomes just, potentially better sort of flowing through life just because everything is kind of got its spot and there's not this sort of confusion happening in your household kind of thing or at your office or whatever. So like when you're dealing with your client, do you kind of tap into that psychological aspect of it?
I think we do. We're not trained psychologists, right? But you can tell, like sometimes the situations are so bad that we can't even get into the closet to measure, right? So you're climbing over piles of stuff. And so those are the type of people that we really recommend maybe call a professional organizer first or declutter first so that you're ready for this new system, right? Because you don't want somebody to, at least I don't want somebody to buy my product, get it installed, and then be like, well, that didn't work. You know, that's
I just think that the way that your life is in your everyday, it indicates how your life is at home. So let's move into a little bit about like the journey. So you're 25 years old. Obviously, now you've got what, 40 employees, you've got warehouses, warehouse spaces. When you were just starting out, you had a little bit of experience working in that franchise closet place. And so what were sort of some of the, you're kind of moving along. How did you get your first client?
well, okay. So once again, my background was in marketing.
Right.
So we designed and took out an ad in my local newspaper. I opened my business, my first location when I first opened. I rented a very small warehouse office combination space, but it was in my hometown. So St. Louis has all these different counties. So I grew up in a little town called Kirkwood. And so I opened my first little space in Kirkwood because I knew people in Kirkwood. So I designed and took out an ad in our little Kirkwood newspaper. And then I also made up flyers and I stapled them to little kids' colored hangers. And I just walked neighborhoods and hung the flyers on the doors.
Right. That's good.
And that's sort of how it got started. And then, at the time, the big splurge on advertising was our Yellow Pages ad. I don't even, right? Any of your listeners remember the Yellow Pages. But that was,
of course, that big, thick, it came out every year.
I mean, that was the place. You had to be in the Yellow Pages and you had to be, on the right page and in the right category. And, so that was our big splurge back then, was making sure that we got into, so I opened, right after Thanksgiving in 91. And I think the new book was coming out in January or February. So that was sort of like, we had to get that phone number and get it in the Yellow Pages. So we didn't miss out on a whole year of being in the Yellow Pages. So that's sort of how we started. I did the closets at my mom's house. I did the closets at some friends' houses so that I could get some photos, right? Because we needed photos right away. We didn't have a website. Google, I don't even remember. I don't think Google didn't exist.
No, yeah.
I don't think the internet existed. But anyway, so it was very, very small. And I was fortunate when I opened St. Louis Closet Company, the whole concept of organized closets was very, very new.
Right.
There was 2 companies in California that were doing it. They were just slowly coming to, the Midwest.
Yeah.
And so, there people, when I said, oh, I sell custom closets, they didn't know what that was. I still sometimes have to describe to people what it is, but most people know. It's much more common now. So I think back then, just educating the community as to what it was I was doing. And
I feel like
how I got started.
Yeah. And I feel like that story, it just like when you were talking about like sort of like the flyer in the mailbox, I kind of wonder, like, it just feels so much easier back then to do marketing. I mean, especially today, like as people are listening to you, like, oh God, if I wanted to start a business right now, I don't even know where I would start. I guess I would start with my Instagram or my Facebook or whatever. But it's just such a flooded market that it feels a little bit overwhelming to, sort of get into the marketing space now. But back then, it was like the Yellow Pages or direct mail and, kind of thing. And then obviously the sort of the testimonial side. So what were some of the lessons? Like if I'm a woman in her midlife now and I'm listening to this podcast, I'm listening to you, talk about your business. And I would probably think, oh yeah, well, sure. Cause she started when she was 25. So, of course she's had time. And, like you said, there wasn't a lot of risk to it per se, as if maybe if I'm starting in my phase now, all of a sudden it feels a little more intimidating. I'm maybe a little bit too old to be trying to do something like that. What would you say to somebody that is thinking and listening? What kind of key messages would you want to say to them to like, just get started and take the leap, because it's fantastic when you do.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think you're ever too young or too old to start. And you have to be, so if you want to own your own business, be an entrepreneur, you have to have, certain personality types, I think. You have to be a self-starter, right? And you have to have an idea or a product that you love so much and you believe in it so much that you are willing to be with that idea, product, service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I hear so many people like, Jennifer, you're so lucky. You own your own business. You can do whatever you want. Well, yes and no. I mean, I work still after 34 years, 7 days a week, and I work morning, noon, and night. I work on the weekends. I work on vacation. My work is always with me. My work was with me at every sporting event that my kids had, when I go to their school programs. Work, when you're an entrepreneur, you're married to your business. Your business is your husband, it's your kids, it's your life. So start off and make sure that whatever your business idea is, at whatever age, I don't think age has anything to do with it. It has to do with, are you so passionate about this that you're willing to give it everything? And then secondly, you have to be the type of person who is willing to take risks. But one of my biggest things, you have to be able to, I think successful business owners, really successful businesses, have to be able to make decisions. A human being makes 2,000 or 3,000 decisions a day, maybe more. I don't know. It's like, do I use this pen or this pen? Do I have coffee or do I have tea? Just all day long, you make decisions. But when you're a business owner, your decisions are affecting other people, right? Your decisions are affecting the success of your business. They're affecting maybe your employees. They're affecting your clients. They're affecting your suppliers, maybe your advertising partners. So as a business owner, you have to be able to make decisions, I think, quickly. And I think when you're older in midlife, like I am right now, you have, a history of making decisions, right? So we can make educated, good decisions. You only make decisions based on the history you have. So the older you get, I think, the better you can make decisions, but you have to make them, right? You have to make them in order to move forward down this path. And the people who I think are not successful in business ownership are the ones that are almost paralyzed. Like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Should I advertise here or here? I can't decide. Should I spend this money? Should I not? And what happens is that everything just stops and then you're not moving down this path. So if you become paralyzed by every decision you're going to make, or, and this is a funny little thing, but if you are the type of person who cannot pick a paint color, and I have lots of clients who cannot pick a paint color for days, weeks, months, sometimes years, they're just paralyzed, then business ownership is probably not good for you. That's what I say, because I'm like, paint it, just paint it. And if you don't like it, paint it again. Because throughout the day, if you're making thousands of decisions, guess what? Some of them are not going to be great. And you're going to have to circle back around and then correct those decisions. But tomorrow is going to be a whole nother set of decisions. So the minute you stop making those decisions, you can't move forward. And being successful at really anything in life, but especially in entrepreneurship, it's all about, let's get to tomorrow. Let's get to tomorrow. What's tomorrow going to look like? Because you're going to have problems. This morning I called into my office and our phone system was down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on with the phone? So we spent all morning. And then literally our water company is at the front door going, oh, we have a notice that the water pipe is leaking. We need to come in and inspect the water pipe. And I'm like trying to set up for the podcast, as and getting the headphones. It's like, but at the same time, you have to be like, okay, get somebody going on this, and somebody called in sick. Okay, we got to reroute, and we're doing a really important social influencers closets today. And I'm like, okay, make sure that, the installers wearing the right shirt, you're looking good. And so you're juggling a lot of things, but you're still moving forward. And I think that is important at any age. And I think that women in their midlife, sometimes we tend to doubt ourselves maybe too much, or not give ourselves enough credit, or have a hard time putting ourselves out there and being like, look, this is my decision. We're going to stick with it. So I think that's probably one of my biggest pieces of advice I like to give, especially women business owners. For some reason, I don't know why we have a harder time making a decision, but it seems like women have a harder time. And I think that we need to get off of that and get moving.
Yeah, I think too, I think midlife kind of ends up being where you start to there's a lot more confidence that you start to lose, I think, whether it's just because the way that your body is starting to shape, your wrinkles are showing. And I think you just kind of do that, your own inner critic, your own self-sabotage a little bit too. I think that's part of it. I want to just clarify, like when you say make good decisions, I know I'm making a good decision, or am I just making a decision?
I don't think you know in the moment if it's a good decision.
Right.
You're sort of taking everything that you've learned, your learned experiences, and
Right.
putting them behind this decision. You don't know until tomorrow when you see the results of that decision. But let's just say tomorrow comes and that decision was not a good one, right? And you're like, okay, wow. Well, so now I've learned that when that happens, we do this instead of this, right? There's going to be this path in the road that we have to choose. Do we take this off ramp or do we keep going straight? And I don't know if you know until you keep going a little bit forward. But that's why I said if you get paralyzed with moving forward, then you never get anywhere. Then you're just sort of stuck in the road. We will ever know, right? I mean, if we all had a crystal ball and could say, oh, is this the right decision or the wrong decision? And when it comes to small business, we were talking a minute ago about marketing and advertising. Marketing and advertising and where to decide to spend your advertising dollars these days, I think it's impossible. It's impossible. And it's what I love. It's been a huge part of me and my business. It was my background. And every day I struggle because there's just so much coming at people right now, right? The internet, like you said, Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and Pinterest and Twitter and, direct mail and TV and online. And you don't even know as a business owner anymore what works and what doesn't work. Right. I mean, it's just
got to be testing. And that's the reason why you're saying make these decisions. I want to talk to before we talked a little bit about problem solving and, being able to solve problems and then also not waiting for perfection. And I think that's something that you had said that you just were never waiting for perfection.
Well, I think we all strive for perfection. I think if you're an entrepreneur or you have that personality in you, you sort of tend to be type A and strive for perfection all the time. But that's really impossible, right? Because if you're only striving for perfection, then once again, you're probably in that sort of decision paralysis, right? You're sort of like not doing anything because you're like, is this going to be perfect? And I think you made a really good reference. Like, instead of striving to get an A+ on everything we do, maybe if we're okay with a B or a B+, we can keep moving forward. And then some of those B+ can turn into A- and then A's and then A+ along the way. But we have to keep going or we'll never even get the opportunity to get there, right? Because there's a lot of trial and error with business. There's a lot of trial and error with just life.
Yeah. And I love that you're saying that. Like the trial and error piece really makes sense to me because it's based on those decisions, right? So you make the decision and hey, like you said, the next day it didn't work. Okay, let's move on. Or 3 weeks from now, or a month from now, or a year from now, it didn't work. But I think what happens is a lot of business owners, when they're thinking about starting an idea, they wait till it's fully baked before they end up putting it into play. And I think that's where we go wrong because, I mean, you didn't wait till you were fully baked and, had everything and, had a roster of like potentially 10 people waiting in line for closets. Because I think you learn along the way, as you're sort of alluding to, I think like you realize this is my minimal viable product. I'm starting here. We're going to just start maybe with closets or small pantries or something. And then it eventually grows as you learn and you gain more confidence through doing versus thinking. Often you can get into that analysis paralysis. So when you're thinking about what else a woman in midlife might be thinking about in terms of starting a business, we talked a little bit about just make the decision and doing something that you truly love. How would they know what they truly love? Like, I guess you kind of knew you loved closets because you said earlier that you loved organizing your closet when you were younger. So it's just sort of like, hey, I think I kind of like this. So what would you say for somebody that's thinking about, I'd like to start something, but I don't know what, and I don't have any skills?
Well, I would not recommend opening a business with something that you're not super familiar with.
Right.
So if I don't know what I want to do, but I want to own a business, maybe then you look at buying an existing business. Or, going to, maybe you have 2 or 3 ideas. Maybe I want to own a retail business, maybe go shadow or work in those types of retail businesses for a month or something and sort of really see, because business ownership is, I don't know. I mean, maybe for a lot of people, it seems super glamorous and super fun. And it's a lot of work. It is literally like it's having another child. For sure. For me and for most successful business owners that I know, it is a challenge every single day. It's a balancing act with your personal and private life. It's a challenge if you're a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter. My mom is suffering some health issues now. And so it's like making time for that and still making time for my kids that are sort of out there in the world starting their lives, and then still sort of taking time for yourself. Right. It's not something to just, I don't think it's not a decision to jump into quickly. It's not.
Right.
You have to have an idea, a passion, a love, something. And if you're just like, oh, I just want to be a business owner. Well, then maybe buy an existing business. I mean, I don't know.
But I think that's a really good idea, because I mean, you don't always have to start from scratch,
Right.
and there's actually so much out there now where you don't even have to own the inventory anymore. I mean, there's so many different ways, and there's different reasons why maybe somebody is starting a business. Maybe it is because, okay, well, now I'm in my 50s and my kids have moved out. I've had a life event that sort of prompted me to reconsider what my next chapter is going to look like. I also think like maybe there's some people who need to bring in some extra income, and having only one source of income is also a little bit like scary too, So I think that a lot of women look at it as maybe a bit of a side hustle as well, which can look a little bit different, but there's still, I think, the same message, which you're saying is you have to like it, or else you're not going to want to get up and do the work for it.
Right.
And if you're not getting up to do the work for it, then it's just not going to go anywhere, right? It's not going to grow. And this is an evolution, not a revolution. And so it's like you evolve and you grow this thing and you nurture it, like you said, with your kids. So what's next for you, Jennifer? You're 34 years old and your son has just started to work in the business. Your daughter's off in university.
Right. Well, that's such a great question. I still love what I do every day. It's still challenging. I'm very happy with where we are, but I feel like there's lots of areas for my business to grow. I do a lot of speaking to high school and college kids about entrepreneurship, because I just think it's so important. Because I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But what's next for me? I love traveling. And now that both of my kids have graduated college and are sort of doing their own thing, I would like to travel more. I've always, thought about maybe writing a book.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I don't know. I mean,
What's in your closet?
What's in your closet, or, all of the funny stories that sort of happen through the years. When you own a business for 34 years, the stories. Sometimes it's just with the employees through the years. And so I'm not sure. My husband and I love to travel, and he is also an entrepreneur. We actually met. This is a great story. We met at a Young Entrepreneurs Award ceremony.
Okay.
And he was winning the award this year. And I thought, I saw the little ad in the paper about it. I was like, he's cute. I was like, I think I'm going to go meet him. This is, years and years ago. And this was in 1994. And so I bought a ticket to the luncheon where he was winning the award. And I walked right up to him and I said, hi, this is who I am. This is what I do. He invited me to sit at his table. And we became great friends. We would talk every day about his business and my business. And a couple years later, he was like, maybe we should date. And he and I together have a real estate business that we run. We're doing that too. So I don't know. Now that my son is in the business, it's fun sort of being there and teaching him of the business. I mean, even though he grew up with it his whole life, but sort of seeing it from
different. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
different. Yeah. So, we'll see. I mean, I still love, I think as an entrepreneur, and you have to love what you do. I mean, so for all your listeners that are thinking, oh, should I open a business? I'm not sure. At any age, really, and whatever your ideas, it has to be something you love so, so much, right?
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. So where can people find you, Jennifer?
Okay, so our website is stlouisclosetco.com. We're in St. Louis, Missouri. So if anybody's around, I would love to give you a tour.
Yeah. you on the podcast.
We have a great showroom, and it's in a really cool old renovated building. We'd love to show it off. We have a great website. Some people can find us there, and reach out because I'm on LinkedIn, and we're on Instagram, and we're on Facebook. We're everywhere. We're everywhere.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, Jennifer, thank you for joining me today. I loved your story. I loved the words of wisdom that you shared today. So I'm sure everybody that's listening is thinking, okay, all right, I'm going to really get started on this. Or they probably picked up some sort of tip from you in terms of growing their business. So thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful talking to you today, Lynette.
My pleasure.
Hey, it's Lynette. Thanks for listening today. Please like and subscribe. And if there's somebody out there that you think could benefit from the episode, give it a share. Midlife is your time, so go get it.